Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, April 26, 2023 Community Preservation Committee meeting. Pursuant to Chapter 2 in the Acts of 2023, this meeting of the Somerville Community Preservation Committee will be conducted via remote participation. We will have a video recording available upon request as soon as possible after the meeting. Thank you to our guests for attending this evening and anyone else who may be out there in the public. Roberta, would you like to do roll call?
Sure. And before I call the roll, I would also like to welcome and introduce two new members who are here with us this evening. 2 out of 3. I received a late notification that we also have a new appointee from the Housing Authority Board who I have not been in communication with yet. So unfortunately, we're missing him this month, but hopefully by next month he'll be able to join. That is, you'll see on the agenda, the latest version of the agenda that I posted, that's James Zamer is the Housing Authority Board member. But I'll start with our new members this evening in calling the roll. Ryan Kirikoff.
Hi, present.
Yep, and Eric Parks.
Hi there, I'm here.
And then the existing committee members, Jahan.
Yes, present.
Laura.
Present.
John.
Present.
David. And Heather. All right, all are here. And I wanted to mention that I forgot to put the meeting minutes on the agenda for this month, but if you don't have a problem with that, we could cover it under other business at the end, if we have time at the end of this agenda. So then the next item that we have is a presentation by Paul Goldstein, who has come, staff member for the Affordable Housing Trust, who's going to give a brief presentation about the draft annual update that was sent to us by the Affordable Housing Trust. Paul, would you like me to pull up the present? Yeah, why don't I will pull up the presentation.
That would be great. Thank you, Roberta. It's only about 3 or 4 slides, so
yeah.
Very long. But thank you.
And this might work better this time than the last time. I had to do some really funny maneuvering to be able to show slides, if I can remember how that worked, but maybe this will just work.
We're allegedly getting Zoom licenses for city employees, so we'll see how long this lasts.
All right, so I'm gonna have to do this thing again, which is to unplug my computer from put it in slideshow mode. And then are you able to see
I can't, but if they're not working too, I mean, I can just read off the notes that I prepared as well. I don't want to hold everyone up. Oh, there it is.
There you go.
All right. Thanks, Roberta. So I'll get started. Thank you, members of the committee, for having me at tonight's meeting. As Roberta said, my name is Paul.
Are you all able to hear me? Are you?
My name is Paul Goldstein. I'm the Housing Programs Coordinator in the city's Housing Division. I also serve as staff liaison to the Somerville Affordable Housing Trust. So before beginning my brief presentation of the Trust's spring report to the CPC, I'd like to acknowledge a couple items. The first is that this report includes information which also should have been transmitted in a fall report to the CPC. Unfortunately, I was not able to produce that report in time to present to the committee during the fall. So going forward, I'm going to make every effort to transmit our report to the CPC on the established biannual schedule, but this report does cover fiscal year 22 and the activities of the trust to date fiscal year 23. The other item I would like to note is that the report is being presented in draft form, since the report has not yet gone through the internal review within the housing division that we usually like to do before finalizing these documents for public consumption. I'm happy to include any suggested revisions from the CPC in the final report. I hope to have a final version ready for publication following that internal review. I'm happy to return to the committee at its main meeting to present the full final report at that time, if you'll have me in to answer any additional questions from the committee. So with that, Roberta, if you want to go to the next slide. So the past several months have been an exciting time for the Affordable Housing Trust. In fiscal year 2022, the trust received about $4.4 million in total revenue. You can see that broken down by categories of revenue on this slide. It's also detailed, I think, in the first table in the report. You can go to the next slide, Roberta. Through March 20th of this year, the trust has received about $19.6 million in total revenue. That's to date about in fiscal year 23. This dramatic increase is due in large part to 3 one-time transfers of city funds to the trust for the purposes of funding specific projects and initiatives. You see on the table about $8.3 million was transferred to the trust last August to establish the Early Action Acquisition Fund. In March of this year, the City Council approved a transfer of $3.5 million to the trust for the purpose of funding much needed rehab at various Somerville Community Corporation owned properties, including units in its 100 homes portfolio. And also in March, the council approved a transfer of just over $1.8 million to the trust to match the trust's commitment to funding the city's new municipal voucher program. You can go to the next slide, Roberta. Thank you. So since fiscal year 2022 and up through as much as the fiscal year 23 as we've gotten through so far, the trust is committed funding to several affordable housing projects and programs. These are noted in table 4 on page 6 of the report. They're also here on this slide. In total, through March 20th of this year, the trust is committed almost $12.8 million in total trust funds to affordable housing projects and programs. That total is inclusive of approximately $5.7 million in CPA trust funds. And these recent commitments bring the total number of units which have been created or will be created with the assistance of trust CPA funds to 127. Among these new commitments is $4 million in CPA bonding for the Clark Hill redevelopment, the acquisition of 184 Broadway as part of the 100 Homes Initiative, and the funding of 3 housing programs with CPA trust funds through an RFP process that took place last summer. And then you can go to the last slide. So like in conclusion, the trust remains grateful for the CPC's report, as the annual CPA allocation is a critical resource used to further the trust goals. As noted in the draft report, the trust is in the final stages of its strategic planning process, and I hope to share the updated goals and guidelines established by the trust during that process in a future report. The trust is excited to continue to pursue and fund new initiatives and programs such as the Early Action Acquisition Fund and the Municipal Voucher Program. The ongoing collaboration with the CPC will be crucial to ensuring the success of future efforts, and the trust does look forward to a continued partnership with the CPC. I am happy to answer any questions about the report committee members have at this time. I do want to be respectful of the time allotted for tonight's presentation. I know there's a pretty packed agenda. So with that in mind, if there are additional questions that don't get answered tonight or that you may have, I would like to encourage you to, if it's appropriate, to email those to Roberta, who can transmit them to me, and I can prepare additional answers in advance of the May meeting, should I be asked to present the final report at that time. Thank you again.
Are there questions from committee members?
I'll jump in there with one. Paul, thank you so much. It was a easy to read report. It was packed full of information, and I thought really useful. It also brings home for me what a big year it's been, with the Clarendon Hills sort of going through and 100 homes continuing to put along. But also, if I understand this correctly, the tenancy stabilization and the home pass are both new initiatives that are being rolled out and are using the, or they're newer initiatives.
So the programs they're not necessarily new initiatives, but the new funding to either existing initiatives or being provided to an agency that hadn't previously been funded with CPA funds. So for tenancy stabilization, that's been a really successful program for a few years now. That's been administered by a few partner agencies. Just Start, who received an award last summer and is currently drawing down on that contract. They had previously been funded by the non-CPA bucket of the trust fund. And so you might recall last summer or late spring, we did a very rolled back RFP process because there's so much money from the FY21 awards due to COVID, that we only allowed agencies who either spent down their entirety of their FY21 award or didn't receive a CPA award in FY21 to apply for funds. So that included Just to Start, was able to replenish their TSP with CPA funds. And the Home Pass Admin Fund, again, is an existing program that's been refunded, and we're actually going to be rolling over some unused funds from that into that as well, and that contracting process is underway. But TSP, tenancy stabilization, it did include a little blurb about that in the report, but that's been a really successful program, and it's been a lot of high demand lately for that. Whether that's due to eviction moratoriums ending or certain like COVID related resources drying up, a lot of our partner agencies are seeing a lot of demand for startup costs or curing rental arrears to avoid eviction. So that's certainly something I think we want to prioritize going forward, and I hope to do an RFP process for that in the coming months to help replenish several of those programs.
Because that's something that we hear about when we do our outreach is Green Line gentrification and the destabilizing effect that it's having on a lot of residents. So I was really glad to see that there was like sort of a ramping up with those tools. And then it also sounds like you're pretty well into the strategic planning process, right?
I don't want to spill the beans, but we're hoping to have the final plan sort of presented at the meeting in 2 weeks. So it's been quite a few months soliciting feedback from the trust and working with our consultant, which has been J.M. Goldson, who's been great. And as noted in the report, during that process, trustees really wanted to revise the funding application and application process to make it as consistent and straightforward as possible, both for applicants and also for the trustees to evaluate these proposals. So that's not necessarily part of the strategic plan, but we did sort of expand the scope of work with the consultant to accommodate that. So in addition to what will probably be the final strategic plan being presented at the May meeting, we're also going to review these draft applications and provide maybe one round of comment before those are finalized in the coming weeks or months.
Okay, and then my last question was, and you touched on this during your presentation, was that the application cycle was a little different. Like it sounds like the last one you had was spring of 22, and then you didn't have a fall one, and now you'll have another spring one, or?
Yeah, so this has been, so for development projects, we kind of have a rolling application cycle. I mean, if there's a project that needs funding, whether for trust, non-CPA or CPA funds, we encourage applicants to fill out the application and arrange preliminary meetings with staff and then present that at the next trust meeting. For programs and RFPs, when I first came on, it seemed to me that the fall was kind of the regular application cycle for programmatic funding. Because so much funding was given out in fall of 2021, shortly before I came on board due to demand for the COVID pandemic, we rethought that in the fall of 2022 about doing an RFP process, or fall of 21, I guess. The dates are getting a little confused. But essentially, when we met as a group in the housing division, there's just so much unused funding out there that was still left over from the FY21 awards. It didn't make sense to do a full-on RFP process at that time. So we did a limited process like I described, just targeted for agencies who either weren't funded at that time or we already spent down the entirety of that award. I would like to get back to a kind of regular funding cycle. I think that's the goal. Right now, we're still kind of just reacting to demand. So for TSP, for example, again, one of our partner agencies is just about expended their FY21 award. So we came up with an inventive solution to roll over some funds from a contract that didn't really have as much demand for that particular program to the TSP program to sort of as a bridge until we did the RFPs out. But because we've had feedback from our providers that there is a demand that money is being spent, I think we want to do that sooner rather than later, so summer instead of fall. But going forward, this is something I'm sort of evaluating and taking suggestions on. And we get back to do something every fall, I think that would be great. But for now, I think we're focused on trying to meet the demand as it appears. If that makes sense.
Okay, that's it for my questions. Is there any other questions from the committee?
Madam Chair, I do have a couple questions for Paul, if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you so much for the presentation. Always appreciate you having come out and present in front of us to give us some relevant updates. I do have two questions, and they're both related to the draft report that was sent over. The first question is around the summary table. I know it says for other, there's loan repayments and bank interest, about 436,000 or so. You don't have to give me exact numbers, but I'm just very curious to see, is it the vast majority of the 436K comprised of loan repayments and a smaller portion of bank interest, or is it like 50-50, something that you could?
That's a good question. Maybe like 60-40, like bank interest and loan repayments. I mean, I'm kind of guessing here. I don't, I do keep track of the trust finances. I get the bank statements, each month, but I also, I'm not the person talking to the bank. So it seems that the interest rates are going up, which is good because there's been a lot of bank interest in the non-CPA account for reasons that I'm not entirely sure. Maybe we're just getting a great deal on that particular account, but because the non-CPA account typically has a pretty high balance, even though we have a lot of funds that have been committed, there's still about like $18 million in there. So the interest on that alone per month is like pretty substantial, which is good. So that's why conservatively, I'd say probably 60% bank interest and 40% loan repayments.
Sure, I think that's more than reasonable. I wasn't looking for exact numbers anyway, so that's perfectly fine. And then my other question is regarding the funding history. So I know that there's 3 one-time transfers to the trust of non-CPA funding sources rather. If you don't mind talking a little bit more about them, and what I'm really looking for is that, are they time bound? What are the sort of parameters that you're working with? That would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some details in the report, I believe. I'm happy to talk about that now as well. So I did sort of struggle with putting this history, this graph together, because if you recall from the last report, we also had a similar one-time transfer in 2018 for the 100 homes bond. And so I felt that was not appropriate to include in the charts because it just threw everything off, which kind of happened here. But because these are such substantial funding sources of revenue for funding, I thought it was important to include it this time. And maybe I can clean this up to make it a little clearer for the final report. But there's no time constraints specifically with each of the one-time transfers. So the early action fund was sort of kind of just coming into the picture, I think the last time I was in front of the committee last summer, and that was made official by the city council in the June 22 meeting, and the trust received that transfer to its non-CPA account in August of 2022. And so the goal is to establish what we hope will be a revolving fund for affordable housing providers to receive an acquisition loan from the trust to get in and get site control quickly to potentially develop a site or to acquire and rehabilitate a site and designate that as affordable housing. So this is sort of the first time the trust has done traditional acquisition lending. We are hoping to have our first applicant for the fund at the May meeting potentially. The Somerville YMCA is trying to acquire a parcel adjacent to it so they can help redevelop the entire site and provide additional affordable housing. You know, there's a decent amount of research done by myself and other staff members to establish guidelines for the fund, and part of the strategic planning process that I talked about, including revising the application, also included creating an application for the early action acquisition fund. So again, no time constraints, but the goal that I've suggested to the trustees are in favor of is if we can keep this sort of recycling as much as possible, and you give out an acquisition loan, then it gets paid back 3 to 5 years later, and it goes out again. That's the perfect scenario. I mean, we'll see how that goes. I mean, we're excited to start administering that, but again, as of right now, we haven't had any official applications, but just a decent amount of interest out there. The municipal voucher program, that's about $1.8 million to the non-CPA trust account. So the municipal voucher program is something that was proposed by folks in the Office of Housing Stability and other nonprofit partners, I think, got together. And the idea is that this is going to be a voucher program that targets Somerville residents who are most vulnerable for being displaced from the city, specifically families with children in Somerville schools, and who aren't eligible for certain other types of housing assistance. So whether that's immigration status or criminal record, because these are city funds, those hurdles won't be an issue. So the hope is that this is going to get off the ground. I think we want to start leasing by September 2023, and the first couple of years of the program are going to be funded by ARPA. The Affordable Housing Trust was asked to provide a long-term funding commitment for at least 3 years starting in 2024. And so going forward, the trust is going to fund it as it's able to. We feel like with the projected revenue coming in, that's going to be feasible. Part of that pitch to the trust was that the city would sort of do some kind of matching commitment as well. So for reasons I can't really speak to too accurately, but there's some hangups with the city providing directly funds that could, there's no kind of legislation where like city funds can't go to a specific person or beneficiary. So to help fund the program, the city transferred its match to the trust to administer it because the laws do allow for municipal housing trusts to fund these kind of programs. So again, there's no timetable for those funds, but they're specifically marked and tracked separately for the municipal voucher program. And the expectation is that they'll last through about 2027. The $3.5 million in funds for rehab at Somerville Community Corporation properties, that came about pretty recently, in March actually. So the Somerville Community Corporation, they have a few properties, some units in 100 homes that really need some rehab work, and there's one property in particular on Somerville Ave, I think it was 657 Somerville Ave, but had been somewhat derelict because of a fire in 2021. And so there's a lot of money needed for those repairs. If they weren't able to secure a funding source and get a contractor on board by the middle of March, they would lose the insurance proceeds and really be kind of behind the 8 ball on that. So the city identified unused funds in the COVID-19 stabilization fund and transferred it to the trust for the purpose of funding the rehab at those properties. And the trust is just in a better position to requisition those funds again out the door than the city would be. So again, there's no timetable on those funds either, but that transfer was sort of done based on a kind of a emergency need. And it's hopefully will go well down the road. Part of that too was also noted in the report is that some of the units that are going to be rehabbed, there's a hope that they'll be project-based for the municipal voucher program. So this rehab work will get these units ready, and then there'll be a voucher attached to them for the municipal voucher program. So it's all pretty, as you mentioned, it's been a big year. There's a lot of exciting new initiatives happening, and we're just glad to be part of it. Hopefully that answers your question. I didn't talk too long.
No, it certainly does. Thank you so much for the info. I really appreciate it. And there's certainly a great need for affordable housing and support to the vulnerable residents of Somerville. So I'm glad that you and your colleagues are working on it. So thank you again.
Thank you.
So I want to just keep an eye on the time. We had allotted 15 minutes to this discussion on a very packed agenda, and I know that our agendas have been going very long lately. So Paul offered to come back in May to continue the discussion about affordable housing. So I want to allow anyone to ask any last questions that you want that are timely this month. And if not, we can continue the discussion next month on affordable housing. Thank you. I did also notice that we have one member of the public in attendance this evening, and I just wanted to invite you to raise your hand if at any time you had a comment or wanted to speak up about any of the subjects that we have on the agenda this evening. Then next on the agenda, thank you very much, Paul, for being here this evening.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and I hope to see you next month. And happy spring. Take care.
So next, we have project updates from all of the projects that we have currently ongoing that we've funded in the past. And I'm not going to attempt to go through all of those project updates this evening. That's beyond what we would ever have time to do. But I did want to bring forward 3 of the projects for which there are currently requests for committee actions on those projects. So
1 second,
I will,
Roberta.
yes.
We can see just your notes,
Yeah.
your screen sharing. I mean, it's not a problem, but just so you know, your screen is live.
I did not know my screen was live. Thank you. I thought I had turned it off. Thank you to Zoom. So I wanted to first introduce the Blessing of the Bay project, and I believe we have Carl Alexander here from the Mystic River Watershed Association to give us an update on the project. And you had requested an extension on the time of the contract. So maybe you can walk us through that.
Yes, hi, good evening, everyone. So great to see you. So Carl Alexander, Greenways Program Manager for Mystic River Watershed Association. I might be a new face with the organization. I started up this past December. I'm also a resident of 49 Myrtle Street, so I'm looking forward to helping to grow some great new open spaces here in the community and in the watershed as a whole. And thank you so much for your work and for your ongoing support of all of our projects, especially Blessing of the Bay Parks revitalization. Certainly a lot of components and pieces as we move it forward. The reason why we're requesting an extension for our existing CPA award is for simply the purpose that we've completed a majority of the project. We've estimated around 80% or so, but the remainder that we have, while we planted native meadow at Blessing of the Bay Park, the germination of the meadow was delayed last summer due to drought. So it really only started to really establish last fall. Basically what that means, just because nature takes its time, we are in need of another growing season in order to fully establish the meadow at Blessing of the Bay Park. So we've requested an extension through the end of 2024 just in order to make that happen. So it's just a very, very minimal component of the CPC grant. It's just monitoring maintenance where needed, and then we're also going to see some additional plugs later on this year to complete the project.
Thank you, Carl, and welcome to Somerville and the Blessings of the Bay project and the Mystic View, not Mystic View, Mystic Valley Watershed. I've got to get it right. Valley Association. So I totally understand about the pollination and needing to, have another season to kind of really get it fully established. And there's yet another grant still out there, right? Like there's still going to be that strip of the street and the sidewalk expanded. All right, so this is for the earlier grant that was more on the sort of the bookends of the two ends. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that that I was tracking that properly.
Correct, yes.
Yeah. So do people have questions for Carl about why they need this extension, or I personally support the extension. I don't think there's any problems with giving them more time to get the pollinator meadow going. Okay.
Yeah, I would definitely support the application, the extension. And in fact, I appreciate them coming in and asking for it, and wanting, and taking responsibility for, overseeing the project long enough to get germination established and make sure that the project is successful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is this something, Roberta, that we need to vote, that we need to take a vote on? If there's any questions or any clarifications people want to get, please ask Carl, or if we're ready for a motion to approve the extension. And is there a date that's through?
I think that I had recommended a 2-year extension.
It says to 5/14/2025.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so just plenty of time. You won't have to come back if there's any glitches. So, I guess it would be a motion to approve the recommendation letter, which we already have in place for the 2025.
A motion to extend the contract until 2025.
Okay.
I'll make such a motion.
I'll second it.
All right, and I will call the roll. Jahan,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Carl,
Yes.
Laura.
Yep.
And Ryan. Oh, I'm sorry, Carl. I'm just going through all the committee members, and I'm like, there are too many committee members. I realize you're not one of them, so my apologies.
Vote as often as you can.
Not yet, not yet.
You can join though. You're a Somerville resident, so keep an eye out for an opportunity to join.
Oh, that's true.
I think the Conservation Commission is actually looking for.
The Conservation Commission is looking for a member right now. So if you're interested in that, you're welcome to reach out to me, or we can reach out to the city. Yeah, there is an open posting.
Yeah, if you're interested, I can give you Malik's contact information, Carl.
All right, thank you.
And my apologies, Ryan. I didn't hear how you voted.
Still yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the motion is approved. I am not seeing anybody, and thank you to Carl for joining us this evening and for the update. That's very helpful.
Yes.
Thank you so much, and really appreciate also the support for the linear park improvements as well with the path. We're really excited to get to work on it.
So I am not seeing anyone here representing the Vida Real Church at the moment. I sent them emails hoping that they might be able to join us. So why don't we postpone the Vida Real until later in our agenda and move on now to a request from PISA for a scope change for Junction Park.
Oh, right, yeah. Somebody.
John, are you able to speak to that? Thank you.
Yeah, so Junction Park technically isn't under, I'm not project managing that, but I can speak to the scope change. So pretty much we had some funding from the Community Development Block Grant, CDBG. So we used that funding for our design costs instead of the CPC funding. So what we're looking to do is take that $100,000 from the 2020 fiscal year funding source and shift that to the 2022 funding source to the 2023 funding source that already currently has $400,000. So pretty much we're just looking to shift some funds because we received additional funding from other grant sources.
So just to be consistent, to have a consistent and transparent process, first of all, Alan is here to answer any questions if committee members have questions about this.
Yeah, no, thank you. I just wanted to say too, the CDBG, we have an annual spending benchmark, and since the CPA was more flexible, we were hoping to shift the funding categories.
So as I'm saying, just for the benefit of transparency and a clear process, I wanted to invite the committee to approve a scope change, since this project was originally recommended as a design project and now we're funding it as a construction project. So again, I'd invite a committee member to make a motion to approve the change in scope for this project to fund the construction instead of the design.
To be clear, and so this money would be spent a year later, or at least a year later?
So that year has already occurred. So the money is to be spent now instead
they
of
were
last
supposed to
year.
have spent it in FY22?
Yeah.
And the project just went out to, well, all the bids have just been received and they had a bid opening. So construction on this project should be starting shortly once they accept the bidder.
I can make a motion to change the scope of the project as proposed in the letter.
I can second that motion.
Okay.
Heather?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Laura?
Yep.
And Ryan?
Yes.
And I don't see David Turin on, oh yeah, you're right there. I feel like we're missing somebody and I can't think of who it is, but maybe my eyes are playing tricks on me.
Carl left.
Yep, I see. All right. So maybe
I'll call him up and see how he wants to vote.
We let him go too quickly. Then I will move on to the remaining projects. I don't know if we'll see someone from Beta Real this evening, so we can maybe after we just talk about the other projects that we have updates for, we can determine whether to proceed with Beta Real now or ask them to come back next month. So the long list of projects that are in the folder, let me open up actually the
My sense is that if they don't show up tonight, that then we should discuss it next month. If it's a petition for off-cycle emergency funds, I feel like they should be able to present.
Yes, that makes sense. It will be unfortunate for their contractor who's waiting for funds, but they we talked about them coming this evening, so they might have to wait. So I'm going to share my screen. Do you see my list of projects? Okay. So we actually, the LHD Property Owner Fund was submitted at 5 o'clock this afternoon, and I haven't had time to put it in the meeting packet yet. So I haven't even had time to look at it yet. So I will drop it into the meeting packet after this meeting, and you can see the LHD Property Owner Fund update. Then otherwise, I'm quite impressed. We have almost a 100% rate of receiving the updates for all of the projects that are currently in progress or not completed yet. So what I wanted to do this evening, though, was to invite all of you, if you've had a chance to look over these updates, invite you to raise any questions or concerns this evening that you would like me to follow up with the grantees over the next couple of months. Maybe invite them to come in over the months of July and August, June and July, to give live presentations or answer questions about their projects.
Do we know
So-
why the Kennedy project is stalled? I'm just looking at the list.
Why which project?
Kennedy School.
Kennedy School project. So that was explained to us last fall when Rebecca was still here.
Mhm.
That the Kennedy School was in line behind the
West,
and
yeah.
that is, I think, also described in their update. It was in line behind the other school improvement projects.
So
So-
it's just waiting in the queue still.
It is waiting in the queue still.
Okay.
And we have since, this year, it was because of these stalled projects that this year we instituted this new condition in our letters, in our recommendation letters, that the projects should be complete or started within 3 years, or else come to us and ask for the committee's permission to continue. So we haven't said that we would pull the plug on any of these projects that are stalled, but it would be, worth a conversation about those if you wanted to consider that.
Thank you.
Is there an expiration on the on the grant award?
For non-city grantees, the maximum length of a contract is 3 years, unless they seek an extension, which has to be granted by city council. So for example, the Blessing of the Bay that we've just approved a contract extension for, that will actually have to go through city council as well. Unfortunately, last year they asked for a contract extension and only asked for 1 year when they really should have asked for the whole 3 years that were available to them. So we have to go through the process of city council approval again.
So had we already granted a one extension to that project?
We had granted them a 1-year extension.
But for the city projects, for the Kennedy School?
For the Kennedy School, there is no expiration. So for city projects, there's no expiration.
Which is why we found ourselves in this thing with Art Farm and Dill Boy and Kennedy School, where there's monies that were awarded, but for whatever, a whole myriad of different reasons haven't been able to go forward. Unfortunately, Kennedy seems to be more about bandwidth than technical underground or environmental cleanup or any of the other things that has reared its head in other places. But
I think Carl unwittingly summarized it in his presentation, that where our funding is more flexible.
And I think my guess is also that other projects have taken a higher priority than the Kennedy School because they meet other priority criteria that PSUF has been addressing. And that's a reason why this project, even though it has funding, has been held back.
Do we have a vehicle now to, I mean, I think that it, like you said, Roberto, you know, we decided this year that we're going to put the, you know, the sunset provision, you know, into the current grants. Do we have any leverage to make the city move on a grant we've previously approved? It's kind of the same discussion we were having with Art Farm, I guess.
I could check with the city solicitor to be sure, but I think, and I don't know if Alan would have input on this. I think it would be within the committee's right to pull the funding from a project that hasn't started.
Yeah, but that's kind of contrary to our goal, which was really just to see the work done.
Right. And I'm not sure if you have leverage to push the project forward other than your leverage is funding or no funding.
I think unfortunately, kind of, you know, projecting forward, what's going to happen is when they are ready to get going, it's not going to be enough money anymore. It was like pegged at some pre-COVID price or something, and it just gets awkward. I mean, it is a sort of, it's the bearer of the flexibility that you know, we would like them to get it done. We gave them the grant to do it, and then it's set on the shelf. So
So this is an example of something that we could schedule to come back to in the summer. And if you wanted, I could look for input on the process if you wanted to consider pulling the funds, or I could invite you know, other like Luisa Oliveira from PSUF to come and talk about this project and what the strategy is for moving forward.
I mean, the difference between this and Art Farm was that with Art Farm, the recommendation had never gone to City Council for a final vote, whereas this one has. This one's been thoroughly voted upon and executed. So it's at a slightly more kind of complete and tied up point than the Art Farm funds are. But yeah, this is from fiscal year 19. I mean, I do kind of feel like we should take this up again as a topic on stalled projects and sunset clauses and what can we do. Maybe we put that on an agenda item.
And just on that, because I was actually looking at the summary, it says fiscal year 18 on the form in our packet. Is it 18 or 19?
Oh, I might be, I'm not sure. I'd have to check on that. I might have, if I wrote the wrong number in one place, I'd have to go back to the files to see where it is.
So I had a question about Grace Church's report. So they had in their report, they had the construction documents that they want to send out to bid, which shows this wall that they have to put along the abutters in order to, for the new members. This is a absolutely fabulous historic church that's used for a number of different social programs over in East Boston near the East Somerville, near the East Somerville school. And they have a food pantry. In order to get people into the food pantry, they had to put in an accessible walk that enters in at the basement level. Which is pretty much sidewalk level, but the site is on a slope. So they're sort of cutting into this slope to make accessibility. And so they have a neighbor where they have to put in, there's an existing low wall, they're gonna have to build a much bigger wall. And when you look at the construction documents, they, on top of this wall, they have another 3.5 foot board fence. And so I'm just concerned that it's gonna cut down on the visibility of the church from Cross Street. But I'm also thinking that this is something where they have to go to the Historic Commission to get approval for their final plan. So it's not up to us as the CPC committee to review these for sort of their historic accuracy. But from historic projects that I've been involved in, we tend to use much lower fences because you don't have these high fences in the sort of historic home vernacular, and then just to check the materials. And I was just a little, and the whole sort of public view, making sure that that stays open. Those were things that concerned me with their construction documents.
That's a good question. Eric, do you know if this has been reviewed by HPC?
Yeah, this is the first I've heard of that. So I'm not up to speed with what documents this commission has received, but we haven't, it's nothing that's come before us in recent times. I could ask our staff about that and see. So how has this been put forward? Is this a proposal that came to us to modify something?
So this is, I think I can pull up the plans that you're speaking of. I think I have them in our.
So this is a progress report from a grantee, and they've been granted several grants, and which they've kind of put together for a bigger bid package to now kind of jump into the work. They got stalled with COVID and contractors and all sorts of things, with using up the prior grant, but now they've got a pot that they're trying to kind of put together one construction push to use up their grant amount. And I think it's a Richardson building. It's absolutely stunning.
It's beautiful.
Not a Richardson building,
Yeah.
but I'm going to try to share the screen. Is this the document that you're speaking of? Oh, Heather, I can't hear you. I don't know if it's you or me.
There we go.
There we go.
So I was looking at the landscape set of this, which is several. Also within the report, they have some images of the abutter's edge. So this just, wait, actually go back to that diagram for a second, just for anyone who's not familiar with the project. To the one more up. Yeah, so that shows you the existing slope and how they have to have this sort of flatter path they're trying to bring in from the sidewalk to the basement door, and then they still have to create stairs to a landing to go to the main door, which is, you know, a level up. But yeah.
If there was not a drawing, but
So, oops, sorry, go back. So here are some of the details, right, of this wall that's going to go along the neighbors. And so very small there, number 10, they call it a guardrail, which goes along the neighbor's driveway. And that says that that's 3'6" high. And that's on top of this retaining wall. That's a brick veneer wall. So you know,
sorry, I'm looking for the photos.
Okay. So that they did all these test pits. That's that.
I feel like there was a photo of
yes,
the
at the end. It shows the neighbor's driveway and the wall. Yeah. So this is the wall. We're on the neighbor's driveway right now, and this is what's actually going to happen in the course of this project is going to get reversed, where this driveway will be higher than the pathway going into the church on the opposite side. So the existing relationship's going to shift. And this wall has to be rebuilt. And for the most part, on the neighbor side, it's just like 6 inches above grade or something. It gets bigger on the Grace Church side as it's retaining more and more earth. But then it's topped with that little tiny fence detail that was in that set, the 3.5 foot high, like board fence. So all the way down this side, you're going to have a board fence with, I can't, teeny tiny here, I can zoom in. I think it's like, yeah, it's like a 4-inch steel pickets.
So you're referring to detail 10 on that sheet there?
Yeah.
Guardrail dimensions. Okay, so it's a metal. So I was a little confused. This is the proposal. This is not a new change they're requesting. This is a part of the package that would have.
This is a package that I think they are currently getting ready to set out to bid, which surprised me to see some of these details, because it made me think, I would hope that before they go and they bid this bid set, that they would have had the Historic Commission review it, because per the condition of the grant, they're supposed to do things with Historic Commission's approval.
Yeah. Okay. I know we've reviewed this subject with them, but not in recent times. I don't know. I guess I would have to go back and just ask Sarah to confirm what we've officially reviewed with this, because I know this is a confusing one, because this is all kind of wrapping up to a master plan that was prepared a few years ago by an architect, and they're doing little chunks as the years go by. But I do remember a discussion about this issue with the retaining wall, where they're dropping the grade along that neighbor's property and a fence. Now, was it that fence or an early design?
It's this one, and so there's two things. It doesn't always have to be a guardrail, because you don't always have a 2.5 foot drop. So towards the beginning of the driveway, it could be lower, where the grades are closer. And then the other thing is they have it drawn as being right on the property line, which also seems wrong, because you have to put in a spread footing per their detail. So the spread footing should be within their own property line. They shouldn't really be constructing the spread footing into their neighbor's lot. So there was a couple of things that just seemed not fully vetted with their edge condition along the neighbor's line.
Okay, I will get in touch with Sarah and just do a little probing in that and see if this is in alignment with what we've have approved already for this project.
So I'll send her this material tonight, and so when you speak to her, she'll have that. That would be helpful.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Okay. So that was the main project update that I was concerned about, that I wanted to bring up with the committee. Does anyone else have anything that they want to discuss on the project updates, or any of the other projects that are?
Are you aware, Roberta, of any other issues or things that you want to bring to our attention?
I am not aware of any other. So the ones that I saw a need to address, I were the ones that I highlighted first. And the other projects, I'm very appreciative of all of the detail that all of the grantees have given us. It was like really interesting to learn where they are. And I'm glad to hear that the Somerville Museum is nearly completed with the work on their FY22 grant. They anticipate closing that project out within the next few weeks. So that's moving along very quickly. And yeah, so I thought it was like very helpful information. I know it was not the most popular request that I made, especially of PSUF, who had about 10 reports to write between them. But like, I know I really appreciated having all of, like, knowing where all of these projects are in the process and being able to update all of you. So I'm gonna flag the Kennedy School potentially come back. And I think that we'll also be able to maybe have an in-person update on the small grant program, the local historic district small grant program over the summer as well. I think they will be able to be moving forward in implementation by that time. So we will maybe come back with those two projects, and we'll look into the Grace Church. So with that.
And the one thing on the Kennedy School project, you know, kind of going to Heather's concern that, you know, now we're in 2023 or 2024 dollars and not 2018 or 19 dollars, is I don't know that I would invite them to ask us for more money. I think that if it's going to cost them more money now, that's on them, you know. But that's, I mean, I don't know. I'm feeling kind of right now. I'm feeling like it, you know, we shouldn't just be a piggy bank that they can put money aside and then when they put it off for 5 years, come back and just get more money.
Yeah. I guess one other question I wanted to ask about these updates is whether it would be helpful for me to present this information in a different format, whether you'd like for it to be compiled into a single report, or is it sufficient that you've had the opportunity to look at this once and I file it away?
Thanks for, I mean, I think what having them and having that they're such short reports is easy. I think one thing that might be really helpful would be the spreadsheet have another column or two, you know, something maybe like the percent complete or the amount I like, you know, so that I'm, because I am going kind of back and forth, you know, between just, you know, your status column and what's actually in the summaries.
Okay. So for the fall report, maybe I will do that. I'll fill in the, I mean, I may not have the percent completed for the fall report.
No, but I mean, to the extent, you know, however they characterized it in their summary.
That's a good point. I'll remember that.
So there was some bellyaching about how time consuming the reports are. And I mean, I think probably one update a year is sufficient, right? You know?
Yeah, one update a year, I think. And we didn't ask for an update at all last year. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure that they updated the previous year. So we're kind of out of the habit, but it really is a best practice. And I think for good reason to have.
Oh, I do too. I do too. I think, you know,
and
if you can't write a little progress report for your grant, that's a problem.
Yeah. We use a similar format when they request a disbursement of funds. So they do have to give us this information maybe a couple times a year, but they can copy paste from one form to another. And the documentation that's required for invoicing is onerous, but it's really necessary too. We need a proof of payment. We need invoices. We need updates on how much has been done. We need to see what's been done. That's for the non-city projects. The city projects have their own process for paying. So. With that, I can move on if you're ready for the next item on the agenda. the Adams Magoon House. I'll just give you an update. I didn't share more documents with you, but the good news, I did put I was prompted by Ryan to put at least the funding recommendation that you voted on in our last meeting in the meeting packet as a reminder. So I've had discussions with the law department over the past couple of weeks, which have been very fruitful, and we're this close to having final documents that I can share with Patricia, that she will have to sign a memorandum of agreement and see an example. The memorandum of agreement will say that she understands that she'll have to execute a covenant and a preservation restriction on her property. And we've been able to draft the covenant and preservation restrictions so that they align with all of the funding conditions as you approved them last month. So we won't be asking for the committee to make any amendments to this recommendation. So I think there's no further action needed from you all on the Adams Magoon House. Congratulations. And we still have a little bit of work to do before we can send it to City Council, maybe a lot of work.
So that's, well, A, that's great. B, then I'm confused by the title of your item, which is amend Adams Magoon House recommendation.
Because I was not sure at the time that I submitted the agenda whether it was going to be necessary to make the amendment.
That's fine. Okay.
Then, so that's all that there is for the Adams Magoon House. The final application materials, I don't know if I need to pull them up. I have incorporated the changes that were mainly on the first page that committee members suggested at our last meeting. And I've updated the online applications and checked for consistency between the printed version and the online version and the instructions. And then I had brought up at the last meeting potentially changing the procedures, changing the number of application, the forms that they have to go through for the application process. And I decided finally, after giving it further thought, I decided against changing the procedure for now. People generally understand how the process works now, and I'm not sure that what we gain from eliminating the eligibility determination form, for example, is going to benefit us or the applicants versus the complication of rearranging the process. So I decided not to make any such changes. So then what I'd be asking the committee this evening is if you would be comfortable with approving the application packet as it is included in the meeting packet.
I'm just looking for some notes I took earlier today and not finding.
So may I ask, just for my education, the intent forms, as an affordable housing developer, I've applied to CPCs across the state, and I don't believe I've ever submitted an intent form before. Is that modeled on any other local municipalities, or is that a unique Somerville idea?
That's a unique Somerville idea, and the purpose of the intent form is really just to make sure that we're in communication early in the process. So it triggers, like I have some record that I can share with my other colleagues, triggering collaboration with whoever I need to collaborate with for these projects. And this only applies to the open space recreation and historic preservation projects. Our affordable housing projects still go through the trust and they have their own application process.
Understood. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm not finding it, but I will continue to look. One of the questions was around this term non-city, the non-city Somerville and community partners or something like that. It was when we're trying to say that private parties who are going to partner with the city need to do this versus city projects completely driven by the city can go differently. So just the term non-city, it was like, qualifying it in the negative rather than maybe is private parties a better word? Like, is there another word that we can use that's not quite so, I know it's all the way through the forms and and the whole thing, but I found myself at a moment going non-city,
Is
like
that the same as non-city, the same as non-resident?
that's what it sounds like, but that's not what it means. It just means that you're not a city applicant.
Oh, it's not the city. It's not a municipal application.
It's not a
Oh,
municipal application.
I misunderstood that too. I thought it was for people that don't live in Somerville.
That's how it sounds.
Yeah. And then I would probably say private applicants or something like that.
Private.
Yeah.
Because you've got public and you've got private.
Yeah.
I'm
I think that
seeing
makes
like a few different times you use it. You say non-city applicants, and then you say non-city of Somerville applicants. Maybe just saying that full phrase of non-city of Somerville applicants will help clarify that.
That makes sense in my mind too, John, but I wonder for people who are not employees of the city of Somerville, if that's not what they,
Right.
that's not what they hear.
You could say applicants other than city of Somerville. That's wordy, but that gets the point across.
Aren't we really kind of getting at private public?
Private public, yeah.
Well, I think we could also say, intent forms are required for projects being, I had it for a second, but projects not being submitted by the city of Somerville or something, so it's going to flip it.
I might. The phrase private/nonprofit applicants could substitute non-city.
Yeah.
I think that would solve it. Okay.
I mean, I feel like we did talk about all this stuff last month though too, right?
I don't remember this specific
Well,
question coming up, or maybe I didn't pay attention.
I think we talked about it more in the context of streamlining the process and not having so many of these preliminary steps. So I think in that context, the issue kind of went away. But then if we go back to maintaining the existing structure, it's a different.
I think part of what we tried to do is open up the calendar so that people didn't think if they missed the intent form deadline that they were then out of it altogether.
But it still reads that way because the footnote still says that these forms are required to be submitted by May 19th. So on May 20th, it suggests you're too late for that funding cycle.
Only for applicants for projects on city-owned property. So the deadline is firm for city-owned property, but it's recommended but not required for all other applicants.
I see. Yeah. I'm sorry. So what's an example? What's an example of a non-city application for a city-owned property?
The
Mystic
pollinator
River
garden.
Watershed Association, Blessing of the Bay.
Blessing the Bay is Somerville property?
So it's kind of a funny property. The first time they've had a couple of different grants for the Blessing of the Bay Park. Most of Blessing of the Bay Park is on DCR land. So we require that they partner with DCR, but we don't have to facilitate that coordination ourselves. So the intent form requirement wouldn't apply to them. But this past year, the most recent grant was on a sliver of land that's owned by the city of Somerville. So the intent form was required, and I had to facilitate, there's a process of asking the city to agree to partner with a nonprofit entity on the project. And so I need that intent form by that deadline to have enough time to facilitate that process.
And so the intent form facilitates that, or the intent form has the city saying, yes, we agree with this project?
The intent form triggers me to start the facilitation process.
Because it's the intent.
Mhm.
It's the initial desire to do something on that land, and then I was thinking on that same page where you have I think all the improvements you did are great. I think the whole thing reads really well and much more clearly. But I did wonder where we have the fiscal year 24 timeline key dates, if that should be 23, 24, because the very first date you give is a 2023 date.
Fiscal 24 funding round.
Right, if you make it a fiscal 24 funding.
Page 1.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but it's an FY 24 funding cycle. So I think if you just clarify it's for the 24 funding cycle, then it doesn't matter that May is still in FY 23.
Yeah, kind of agree.
That works for people who are used to the June to June cycle.
Yeah,
But for a lot of people in the public,
but if they're not used to that,
January to January.
Yeah.
I'll share this.
I mean, the July dates are, or well, no, the July dates are 24. Yeah.
All right, so I changed the title of the timeline to the fiscal 24 funding cycle timeline.
I think that's fine. I do agree with you, Heather. A lot of people don't understand, federal and state fiscal years, but I'm not sure we can. I don't think we have to try and manage all the way down to that level.
All right. Footnote on this page. I think step 1 is on page 5, not page 6. So just before you publish, I would check all those cross references, make sure they don't move around.
You were looking at this in Word. Your Word might have changed the formatting. So
yeah,
I did check it before I sent it out, but I have to PDF it before I share it.
Okay.
Step 1, page 5. Yeah, actually, these don't look like they.
And it was also just down in the footnote where you have the thing about the intent form.
Yeah. Page 6, step 1.
So that would be page 1, yeah.
Although the applying for CPA funds, step 1 is on page 5. Okay.
So that's something you can just sort of cross-check before once you've PDF'd it and it's like ready for publishing. On a different level, I had a question about the evaluation rubric.
Before we leave that footnote, I actually was thinking more,
Okay.
Heather, about your point about the dates. And I wonder if even in that footnote saying that these intent forms are required to be submitted by May 19th, 2023 would make it clear that these first several dates are in 2023.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because when you get to January at the bottom, you do say 2024, and maybe that makes it gonna add some clarity that we're not talking about May 2024, for
Yeah.
these forms.
Yeah, I see.
Or add dates to that whole column, add year to each of those dates.
I added a year to the first date, and then I don't know.
I think that works. And then you have it when the calendar flips over in January.
Because I was thinking about it more, I was realizing someone could, I'm not talking about when does the fiscal year begin, but someone could be confused about which May we're talking about.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Are we good with this page? Any other comments on page 1?
Only 26 more to go.
So the evaluation rubric is where I was going to jump to next. So this past year, for new members, we tried to use this rubric for the first time. It was helpful, but not golden. And people, it's sort of, you have to do a lot of kind of interpreting it for the different projects and kind of tweaking it. So I was just wondering, because it's sort of the way it reads in here is like that this is a really solid thing. Like this rubric is like, we're going to go through, we're going to assign these points, and then like that's how we make our decision. And I was just wondering if we needed some sort of qualitative sentence that said something about I wasn't even able to write it properly, but I was saying like the CPC recognizes unique value embedded in each application and project proposal. The evaluation rubric is one comparative tool used during the award process. Or even possibly deleting the points, the 1, 2, 3, and 4, and just leaving the good, bad, and because that way it's encouraging them to hit all those bases without it like having an assigned value, which was one of the things that was hard in using it, was the adding up those points versus
I agree with taking the points away myself. And I wanted to highlight a bullet point on the page before that rubric. The instructions do say when a proposal meets the statutory eligibility requirements, the CPC may rate projects using the criteria outlined. The final decision of the CPC on a project is based on the vote of the committee, and such rating criteria are a guide to the committee in its decision making. So you might want to add more language to that.
No, I missed that. So I think that totally hits on what I was wanting to have expressed.
But this is all in reference to table 1. Is there a narrative on how we use table 3?
I think that that's a mistake and that it's meant to say table 3.
Okay.
Table 1 was the minimum eligibility.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. Are there, does anyone else want to weigh in on anything on this page that's up now? If not, I may just keep going with my list, if that's okay.
Doing great.
Page 11. So projects proposed on public property.
This is where I would have also talked about non-city applicants, I think.
Yes, and so here it says the intent form, these intent forms are due June 24th.
Oh, good catch. That was from last year. This is
Okay.
meant to be May 19. And I wonder whether
Okay.
May 19 is unfair, given how late we're
I was wondering if we were giving them a window between May 19th and June 24, where it was like, we'd like it here by this, but we really drop dead date is there. Because I was going to just suggest putting in the window May 19th through blah, blah, blah.
And
it's
should
meant
that
to be.
say FY24 in that same paragraph instead of FY23?
Yes, you are right. So I didn't catch that this page had time sensitive material in it. And so a question is whether, I mean, I release this next week. That gives people, what, 3 weeks
It's coming up quick.
be aware of this. So I don't know if we want to push it out to the end of May. Or even mid-June.
That's a really good point.
Yeah,
May 19th is really soon.
Yeah,
it is.
yeah. I think May 31st or even like you said, mid-June is okay.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing is, and Eric, I don't know if you can speak to this. One of the bits of coordination that's needed is for any historic project, they need to get themselves on the HPC's agenda. And HPC is very hard to catch over the summertime. So that's why we had last minute delivery of HPC approvals before the projects, before our committee voted on the projects last fall. Just because it took that long for HPC to actually see all of the projects. So that was my hope of moving it up earlier, was that we'd have give HPC a longer window to coordinate. But I don't know if it makes a difference.
It's helpful. We've in the last 2 months moved to twice a month meeting schedule, which is, and if the question is more about how we can expedite the HPC review process, I think that could help.
How much time do you need? So not how to expedite it, but how do we give you as much time as you need to comfortably see all of the applications first?
We've typically done that in a single meeting, as I recall. And I would think that a month would be suffice for that. We've been operating on a short quorum, so we tended to miss, there are times when we have to miss meetings because we just can't get a quorum together. We're under a small committee. I think a month would be adequate for that. How long have you given us? Here, let me go back to your document.
So if we go back to the full timeline, ideally, you've seen the projects before September 15 in a perfect universe. Last time you saw the projects in October, and I think that we didn't have your review letters until I flip them into the applications after the applicants presented. So it was really a last minute And that was with the June 24, but you might, I don't know, you may be able to schedule them sooner this year than you were able to do last year.
So last year we saw them in September, you're saying?
No, last year, I think you didn't see them until October,
October.
after
Okay.
our October meeting. But
Okay, because
we'd
your
like
meetings
to
are,
have-
and I think you typically meet right after we do. I think that's one of these little quirks, I believe. We're the third Tuesday. We're what, the fourth Wednesday?
Fourth Wednesday, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit caught up here, so I can't really answer that emphatically right now. But
I think one of the questions, part of the puzzle is, do you have historic commission meetings in August?
yeah, we typically have them every month, and unless something odd happens. So I don't remember. Last August we I think we had to skip one because of a quorum issue. But I don't see any reason that this would be the kind of thing we'd review and approve in a single meeting, and then you're just waiting for staff to kind of formalize it, right, for a letter that comes here.
I think we could make this more like June 1st or something for the intent form, that since we're getting it out, the materials out, kind of late. And that just gives them a little bit more time, and it gives the process, there's still plenty of time for process between June, July, August, before
That would,
the applications are due.
yeah, that would be plenty for us.
Yeah.
We have, last summer we were having meetings once a month, and we're going to be reassessing that in another month, whether we want to continue with this twice monthly thing or not. So, that would make, if we keep going with that, it makes it even easier to kind of zing in with a meeting.
So I've updated it in both places to be June 2, that's a Friday.
Does that work? And that gives you enough time to get it to us then?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's an internal process at this point. It doesn't have to go through the CPC.
Okay.
So what date did you make it?
June 2.
June 2nd, the Friday? Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, Roberta, do you then shepherd those intent forms through to a city partner?
Yeah. So
you do that, and so they're not responsible for like getting city buy-in. You do that?
yes. So I'll reach out to the city department. I'll determine which department I should reach out to, and then I will facilitate a meeting between the applicant and the department. And then they'll discern whether this is a project that should move forward or not. Last year, we did have another city-private partnership that had been proposed at the eligibility determination stage. And then they dropped out because they had the organization had staffing changes and weren't able to complete the application process. But like that one,
the city or the applicant?
What's
that?
The
city or the applicant dropped out?
The applicant dropped out because of the applicant staffing changes.
They lost. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and that one, so where it might have been easy to figure out. Well, it wasn't actually that easy to figure out who should be involved in the Blessing of the Bay project. I have to do some sleuthing to find out like who is responsible for that sliver of land and who should be engaged in this project. And the other one would have involved school property. So I had to find out who needed to be engaged from the school department and also have a partner from PSUF to be involved in that project. So like that's why we have that lead time for those city partnerships, because it's not that easy of a process.
And we're actually trying to make it easier for people who aren't familiar with partnering with the city to do so by having Roberta as a liaison to help them connect
Yeah,
with the
no,
right
that,
parties.
that seems like a big lift for Roberta.
It is a big
To
lift,
try and
yeah.
figure that out. Ryan, do you have any sense of how other communities in Massachusetts do it?
I don't really. I haven't been attuned to the inner workings of them. I mean, generally when I'm applying, I'm only seeing one date. Honestly, that's it. So I don't know if there's any kind of background work done ahead of time for non-affordable housing projects, but yeah, it's typically just one date.
Somerville, I think we do a great job of making simple things complicated. But when I try to simplify it, it's complicated. So
But I think that we need to kind of roll with this year's schedule and materials.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
like kind of
especially.
miss them right now and not reinvent them. And then there's always time to talk about simplifying it next year if our deliberations don't run and for months and months into the cycle.
any other edits that you've all picked up on?
Roberta, I did notice 2 more instances where it says FY23. One is on page 14, kind of halfway through, right before the eligibility determination form.
Yeah.
And then there's another instance on page 18, right at the bottom, that first line of the first, that last paragraph. And then it also says May 19th there.
And so this gets back to that term non-city applicants.
I hate to say, I think non-city applicant for city-owned parcel maybe as clear as we're going to get. Now that I understand, we're not talking about non-residents.
But I think it's also at the top of the page, right?
Also, Roberta, do you see on page 5 at the beginning of step 1 that you have the intent form due date? You have to update it there if you haven't.
Thank you. You all are discovering what a competent proofreader I need to be able to deliver a final document.
Can you go back to that header on this page, 18? Private, non-profit, then to just get rid of Somerville. Yeah. And get rid of and community.
This is the intent form is for all private and nonprofit applicants.
Applicants propose
Okay,
on
yeah.
projects proposing, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Last year I did update this a little bit in that it used to, the intent form used to only apply to projects on partnerships with the city of Somerville or for people who are looking for feasibility studies. And I think a lot of applicants really don't know what they need. So I'd rather they come sooner and ask me to tell them what they need than to wait until a couple months later and then I say, well, it's too late. You should have done it before.
Yeah.
So
Bert, I see one more instance of May 19th. I don't know if you already got this, but on the CPA intent form on page 19.
Yeah, if you just Control F and write in May 19, they'll all come up. If there's any left, just like double check it.
and FY23s as well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll do a find and replace it after.
Yeah, you can also like, like Jahan was doing, just do a search for FY23s.
Right.
Anything else we need to catch?
I think that's it for this document. That was, yeah.
Yeah.
Then I would ask is if a committee member would be willing, if you would all be willing to approve this application packet with as amended.
So we need someone to make a motion for that.
I can motion.
Okay. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Jahan?
Jahan, do you
Sorry,
approve?
yes.
Jahan?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
And Heather?
Yes.
Then the application packet is approved, and I will release it as soon as I do those last find and replaces.
Thank you.
And
Yes. Congratulations.
Yeah.
thank you. We're getting there. We're almost through this. This has been a slog this spring. It really has. So my apologies to the new committee members. Not all meeting packets are this full of material, but we've been
Yes, they are.
yeah, we've been working hard to
Thank
stay
you,
on top
Roberta.
of it this year. Some of them actually are this full or more, so I don't promise that it never will be, but not always. So the next is a public engagement report. So I included in the annual review section of our meeting packet, annual review outreach for FY24. So this is going to be an appendix to the community preservation plan update that I'll be giving you next month. But this is an important exercise to give us a chance to think about what have we heard from the community over the past year that will inform what should be our priorities, and how should the committee allocate the funds between the program areas for the next year. So I will, am I still sharing my screen? Yes. Okay, I'm going to unshare my screen for a moment. And I'm just going to give an overview walking through the report, and we can come back or maybe I will put the report on the screen again. I'm really struggling to juggle GoToWebinar's way of handling sharing screens.
Are we able to sunset GoToWebinar soon? Was it?
Soon, we're given this fall for switching to Zoom. So I hope they're working on it. So the, let me just give an overview. So first of all, we had several ways of carrying out public and stakeholder engagement over the past year. It's not just a one-time or like a 1 month event, even though I billed this past March as being a public engagement month for the CPC, but we're carrying out activities throughout the year. And I'm totally open to suggestions, either now, later in the year, or just in person if you want to talk to me anytime, for how we can improve our public engagement, do more public engagement throughout the year. So yeah, we don't necessarily have time tonight to drill down on how to do this process better, but I'm totally open to having that conversation in the future. So what did we do? We had the annual public hearing last month at our March meeting, tabling events throughout the year. Both tabling events were in the summer and fall, as well as during the month of March, at farmers markets and community events and at the public libraries. I interviewed stakeholders, which this year I focused on city staff from many different municipal departments. I might also sometimes interview some of our grantees and programs, so I can learn more about what they do and see where there are opportunities for partnership and potential projects that they might be able to unlock in the future. And then we also had public surveys, which were available online and in print and on the Summer Vision website, which I'll explain more about in a bit. So at the annual public hearing, for the new members who just joined us, I'll describe what happened last month. We heard from staff representing 3 of the program areas who told us what kind of initiatives they're currently working on, and they offered some suggestions for the committee to think about with respect to the CPA program. Tabling events for the new members, as I mentioned, they typically occur over the late summer and fall at the farmers markets and the Summer Vision, or not Summer Vision, the Summer Streets events, and in the winter at libraries and the winter market. So the committee members typically volunteer to staff the tables, and I try to be also attending as many of the tables as I can, especially with so many that we do in the summer. Sometimes I'm not able to be there at all of them. So the purpose of the tabling events is to gather input from the public and share information about what we're doing. And so you can see what the table looks like, the kinds of activities that we have at the table to share information. So the report that I put in the meeting packet gives a sum of the votes that were given at each of the events, prioritizing the program areas. Participants also gave written comments as they were invited to do. They put sticky notes on the board listing ideas that they had specifically pertaining to the program areas, or in some cases having nothing to do with our program areas, but I still took their comments. And in some cases, the participants voted on each other's ideas, and I recorded that information, even though that isn't officially part of our process. So that's what I've shown on the screen right now. So the average of all the events, there were 1,800 stickers, which I hand unpeeled myself off of the board between each of the meetings. And there's really fairly consistent voting. In all of our public engagement activities, we typically come up with about the same breakdown of the 3 program areas, what people favor between affordable housing, historic preservation, and open space and recreation. And What else did I want to say? I do want to caution that, you know, we have to recognize that who participates in this public engagement is already a self-selected group of people who will engage with us. So it's not it's not scientific. It's not necessarily representative of the whole community. And it also, people in the public don't have a solid idea of what kinds of applications we see in each of these program areas. So when they're given more specific information about the types of projects we've funded, sometimes their votes change about how they would prioritize the funding between the program areas. So this should encourage us, even though there's very consistent indication of what the priorities are, the committee's strongly encouraged, you have more information than they do. So take into consider all of your knowledge of the program, and not just the votes from the public, in thinking about how you will prioritize the funds this year. So I'm going to move on then to what I learned from the summer.
One second, just to interject again, to orient the committee. I think next month we're going to be voting on the pie, on how we're going to divide up the funds for this year's grant award. So this is partly laying the field work for that discussion, which is having a chance to review the public participation and the goals and all these things. So then next month, when we sit down and decide how we're going to allocate the funds, you have all of this background information going into that discussion.
Roberta, I just have a real quick question, and I'm assuming I know the answer to this. On the table which shows the percentages of each category, you know, by location, yeah, that one. I'm assuming that those averages at the bottom row are just straight arithmetic averages of the percentiles, they're not weighted. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah, so we may want to just kind of notice that as as you're looking at it.
So Summer Streets on Somerville Ave and Winter Farmers Market are much, you know,
right,
weigh much more heavily in this 1,800 votes than.
Yeah, exactly. 35% of 18 is a lot different from 57% of 186, you know, or 400 and something. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
But they're still, but like you pointed out, the distributions are relatively similar anyway, you know, so I don't think it makes I don't know that it makes a huge difference, because the proportions are still pretty consistent.
Then I wanted to skip down and talk about the stakeholder interviews. So as I mentioned, I conducted interviews with staff across several city departments to learn about the work that they're currently doing and explore opportunities for coordination or potential CPA projects. I'll invite you to read this list yourself to see specific sites or needs that were mentioned. And I also wanted to mention that in some cases there have been new plans that have been published over the last year, and I will skim those plans and reflect those in the body of the community preservation plan update that I give you next month. So I'm going to jump back up to the Summer Voice page. So on the CPC website, you can find a link to our Summer Voice page, which is an interactive tool that prompts input from people who use it. This is available throughout the year. It goes into a little bit more depth than our online survey, which is given annually in the winter when we're doing this process. However, it's only done in English. So the online survey is translated into all of the languages that we have translations for. So this, it allows people to drill down a little bit deeper, but only people who are English speaking. And just some interesting things that we learned through the Summer Voice page. I thought it was interesting which of the sites in the city are the most frequently visited. I'm not sure that I gave, I have the detailed data if you're ever interested in seeing that. I didn't include all of the detailed data in this report. So the most frequent sites that they visited are the Community Path, the West Branch Library, and Junction Park. And that's also somewhat similar to what we learned in this survey. We'll see that data in this report, which are the most well-known sites. So it's kind of interesting to know, like, to think about those sites as having the largest impact of the sites that have been funded so far. And the Summer Voice page results highlighted a need for water fountains and benches in parks all across the city. And some of those improvements are actually improvements that are programmed in the things that we funded in the past year. So we can feel good about actually meeting some of those needs that are identified on the Summer Voice page. So the online survey, I'll just skim through this quickly. It received responses mostly in English, but also some responses in Spanish and Portuguese, which is not a lot of non-English speakers, but quite honestly, it's a first in my experience that I've had this many non-English speakers participate in an online survey and provide written comment. I don't have the written comments back yet from the Spanish speakers, but I was able to include the written comments from the Portuguese speakers in the report that you have. The Spanish speakers will be returned to me. I just didn't have enough lead time. And it's also geographically well distributed around the city. Some of the wards have less representation, but for the most part, there's at least someone from every ward who's responded to the survey. We see that, as I mentioned before, which projects have had the greatest impact. Again, the West Branch Library is by far the most widely appreciated project that CPC has funded so far. And keep in mind that this is a historic preservation project. So the historic preservation projects are highly visible and public buildings that are widely used. So that's, I think, something that is not what comes to mind when people think of historic preservation often. The program area distribution, again, is similar to what we saw in the tabling events. People are especially keen to see the city increase the quantity of open space, and this is also echoed in the Summer Voice surveys, especially for passive recreation or for specific groups such as teens who are currently underserved, or a dog park is often mentioned, especially in West Somerville. And a lot of comments about increasing tree cover throughout the city. There's a lot of support for making improvements to city-owned buildings. A lot of people are mentioning City Hall and prioritizing handicap accessibility. And then finally, I'll just skim over the demographic results. The demographic questions were intended to let us know who participated in the survey, and importantly, who is underrepresented in the outreach. So on these charts, the survey respondents are in orange, and the ACS is the city's general population measured in 2021. I need to figure out how to update this. I missed updating the surveys. It's actually 2021 in all of the surveys. So the survey respondents tended to be more middle-aged, fewer younger and older respondents. There were survey respondents in all of the income brackets that were given, but they tend to be more affluent than the general population, and more likely to be homeowners. Actually, no, they were more likely to be renters this time. It's the opposite is usually the case. So, so that's all that I wanted to run through this report with you. But I did want to just bring up the goals, especially for the newer committee members. A document that I included in your meeting packet just reiterates what the goals were that were articulated in last year's community preservation plan. There's overall goals, and then there are goals for each of the program areas. So I wanted to invite comment on whether committee members, we talked about this a little bit at the last meeting, but invite comments on whether committee members see the need for updating in any of the goals or priorities that are articulated in the plan.
I have no updates that are of substance, but I think partly with the turnover in the committee and stuff, we should probably put this in next month's meeting package as well, just so that people have a chance to refer to it and just have another go at it.
Another opportunity. Yeah, that's a good point. I'll do that. So this is also on the same document, showing the percentage. So for the new members, the Somerville CPC votes ahead of time on the percentage of allocation for each of the program areas. And highlighted is what we had, this should be percentage 23 revenue. Highlighted is what was in the previous the way that we allocated funds last year. And so the question for next time will be, how do we want to apportion these funds for this coming fiscal year?
If I can comment on that, I think it would be useful if the data exists to understand in last fiscal year how many of each category, how many proposals within each category were rejected, if there were any that on, you know, in the interest of preserving the funds and not going over the allocations that had been set a year ago, just so we can understand, you know, what's the scarcity of resources for each type.
It was a really difficult funding round, and maybe if I can just very quickly summarize what happened. We did not outright reject any of the proposals, or maybe we outright rejected one of them, but they volunteered to be rejected. So we had far more requests in the historic category than any other category, and it exceeded the available funds by about $2 million initially. And we were able to kind of negotiate and trim down to an amount that gave, so one of the projects we took off the table because it wasn't ready to go yet. That was the one that volunteered to be rejected. And there were a couple of projects that never completed the full application, so they dropped off the table. And then there were a couple of projects where the committee asked the applicant to prioritize what's really the most important thing that we could fund for you this year, and could you wait until next year for the rest of your project? So after we went through all of those iterations, we were able to bring the funds, the requests, to within an amount that the committee was able to fund this year. However, they did that by dipping into reserves that we can't do every year. So the reserves that would be available next year will probably, not be sufficient to be able to do that level of dipping again. So.
Okay, that's helpful background. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, any other questions that would be helpful for me to answer before the next time to help you evaluate this efficiently next time? I should just put this away. There are just a couple of more things that I wanted to run through other business this evening, if you don't mind my moving on in the agenda. So you might want to wait until next month to approve the minutes from the last meeting, unless you want to take care of that now.
Let's do it next month.
Okay. And again, I'm going to push off. I've given you the 2023 agenda calendar to give you a heads up on what's coming up in the next few months. And I would welcome input on things that you'd like to see or change over the future. That's a discussion that we could have as a committee at some point in the future, but we haven't had time to talk about that. I wanted to ask if it could be possible, however, to reschedule next month's meeting. It's scheduled for 5/24, and I am going to be away that week. So I wonder whether you'd want to meet the week of 5/17 instead, or if you'd prefer not to change the date of the meeting, I could have all the material ready and Alan could be a substitute for 5/24.
I'm flexible, so I'd like to hear from the rest of the committee what your preferences are.
I could do either. The 17th works fine for me.
17th works fine for me as well.
17th is fine for me.
Yeah.
I'm flexible as well.
So I'll reschedule next month's meeting for 5/17.
We're not letting you off the hook so easily, Roberta.
That's really soon, actually. It's like 3 weeks.
There's a lot of material still to create in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I'll be happy when this meeting is done. All right, and one last reminder to please submit your code of conduct that the city has asked all of the committee members to sign. If you have any questions or concerns about it, the instructions are in the letter that I sent you for who to contact. Let me know if you need me to resend that.
I was confused. I'm actually confused by that. I do remember seeing some stuff, but I know my other committee has said they're still waiting. I'm still waiting for something. So maybe I'll have to talk to Malik, because I didn't think I had anything to do yet.
There's a form for you to sign, but they aren't giving a hard deadline for you to submit the form, because they want to make sure that you have as much information as you feel you need before you sign the form. So if you're comfortable with it, sign it, send it back to me. If you're not comfortable with it, we'll find a way to answer your questions.
I'm assuming we only need to fill out one form? Yeah. Or do I need to do it for each committee?
Oh, probably. Well, you can fill it and email it to both me and Malik, and that should take care of both of your committees.
You have to list your position on the form. Maybe you just list them both or something like that.
Usually I'm sitting.
I don't know, David. I don't know if you can you can conform to the code of conduct.
I always fail the ethics test. You guys are, ethics standards are much, much looser than in the federal government.
Hmm.
And that's everything I have for you this evening.
All right.
All right.
Can I have a motion to close the meeting?
I'll make it. Let's close.
I'll second that.
All right.
I'll call the roll. Jahan,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
David.
Yes.
All right. Meeting is adjourned. All thank you very much. And we'll see you on 5/17.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, especially to our new members, and welcome.
And welcome, yes.
Thank you very much.
Bye all.
Everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
I don't